Each week, we open our service by lighting our chalice. This morning's chalice lighting words are by the Reverend Molly Brewer. My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you, that everything is okay right now, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. But as we light our chalice, I ask you in this moment to remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love.
So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln on this Sunday morning. My name is the Reverend Oscar Sinclair. I'm joined up here on the chancel this morning by our worship associate, Jamie Radcliffe, who is currently in Laramie, Wyoming. Yeah. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln aspires to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual experience to transform ourselves and the world. It's a big vision that we proclaim every time we gather together. And we know that creating a loving community begins with welcome. So whether this is your first time here or your 500th, if you came here hopeful or heartbroken, whatever your age, whatever your gender, whatever your skin color, whomever you love, you are welcome here. You are part of this community. And if it is your practice as you go forth from this place in about an hour or so, share about what you have found here. If this is a place that has changed your life, say, you know what, I go to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln, and it has changed my life. If this is a place where your kids like to come, say, you know what, I go to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln, and that's a place where my kids come and they are taken care of so I can sit and nap while the preacher preaches. That is a service we provide. But regardless of what brings you here, you are welcome here as part of this community. So as we enter into this time, this space, with these people, take a moment. Ground yourself. Put your feet flat on the floor. And be present. Take a deep breath. And let us begin. Also, I have an old version of this welcome. Welcome to the folks that are on the live stream. Also for you, ground yourself. Put your feet flat on the floor and join in worship.
anyone would like to come forward for the story, you're welcome to do so now. I appreciate that enthusiasm, Sasha. Our story today is called Guess Who My Favorite Person Is by Bird Baylor, who's one of my favorite authors. I happened to be in an alfalfa field, barefoot, sort of lying down, watching some ladybugs climb yellow flowers, when I saw this little farm kid who was also barefoot, sort of lying down, watching ladybugs climb yellow flowers, and helping them up again when they fell off. Want to see my favorite one? So I went over to where she was. She pointed to a bug. To tell the truth, I couldn't see much difference between that one and about a million others. I was going back to my own part of the field when she said, "Now choose your favorite one." And it wasn't easy because I hadn't ever practiced choosing ladybugs, but finally I did. That one. "Oh, I can't believe you like that one." "I passed that one up about 2 days ago, but that's your business." For a while, we didn't talk at all. I stretched out and closed my eyes and just let the alfalfa be taller than I was. But she said, "What's your favorite thing, being asleep or being awake?" "Awake." "Then wake up! We can play the Tell What Your Favorite Thing Is game." "I think we're already playing it." "We are, and it's my turn. My favorite turn is first." "All right, then go ahead." Okay. Tell me what your favorite color is." "Blue." "See, you're already doing it wrong. In this game, you can't just say blue. You have to say what kind of blue." Okay, I get it. Let me think. You know the blue on a lizard's belly? That sudden kind of blue you see just for a second sometimes? It's so blue that afterward you always think you made it up? "Oh, yes, I know that kind of blue." And then she told me her favorite color, and it was brown. Maybe I looked surprised because she said, "Not many people appreciate brown, but I do. And the one I like the best is a dark reddish brown that's good for mountains and for rocks. You see it in steep cliffs a lot." Yes, I know that kind of brown." And then it was my turn, so I asked, "What's your favorite thing to touch?" "Well, my feet like mud, but my face likes wind, especially if I'm running up a hill, so I have to choose both." "Well, it isn't fair to choose two favorite things." "Oh, it is if you have to. Any other way to play it would be silly." I could see she was right. We must have named 100 favorite things that afternoon. My favorite sound is babies laughing. She tells me then that her favorite dream is flying. It's so easy in that dream, looking down on little valleys, flapping my arms when I want to go higher. I've dreamed it 7 times. My favorite dream is finding turquoise beads when I'm just out walking along, not really looking, not really trying to find them. I dreamed that once, about a year ago. Finally, I said, "What's your favorite time of day?" Now. Just about now. When I've been running in the field and getting all out of breath and falling down and watching the ladybugs. And then finding someone to play the Tell Me What Your Favorite Thing Is game and playing it. And then maybe walking back as far as the road together. I was going to say that sunset is my favorite time of day, when all the pinks and golds of the desert paint the sky. But when I thought about it, I wanted to choose now, too. I wasn't sure she'd let us choose the same thing, but She was nice about it. Oh, sure we can. That's my favorite way to end the game. By then it was getting late, so we walked back as far as the road together. And that is the end of our story. The children are now dismissed to their classroom. You can follow me, I'll head back there too.
Our next hymn is number 16 in the gray hymnal, or Above Me. 'Tis a gift. So if you would rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing. Each week, as a central part of our time together, we join as a community to mark the moments of our lives. We share with one another our joys, our sorrows, the events that mark the steps on our journey. The threads of sorrow and those of joy are intertwined in the fabric of our lives, present for all, remembered by all. We share those threads, and then they are woven together with those of others in our community. Our joys in doing this are shared and magnified. We are comforted in our sorrows. So I invite you to type into the chat or to speak into this shared space your name or the name of another you wish to be remembered in sorrow this morning. Family of Taylor Sansoni. Pam.
The family of Larry Wallace.
The family of Larry Wallace.
Titan who lost his kitten Nala.
Titan who lost his kitten Nala. The Homer Wambeam family, the family of Jeffrey Deal, sorrow for Jackie's continued illness, Abby Swatsworth's mother, Leden Swatsworth, who passed away a few days ago. Sorrow from Amy Miller that her mom is still ill. For Kay Young's family, the family of Val Jones, her death is both a joy for no more pain and a sorrow. We also know, there are whole sermons written about this, that sorrow is not the end of the story. That's why we always start with sorrows and end with joys. So I invite you to speak into this shared space or write in the live chat your name or the name of another you wish to be remembered in joy this morning. Our first granddaughter is due by the end of the week. I saw like 3 people start silently cheering.
We'll celebrate our 52nd
52nd
wedding anniversary tomorrow.
wedding anniversary tomorrow. It's a 1-year-old birthday.
Daiquiris at the man's last night for the church auction
Daiquiris at the man's last night for the church auction
item.
item, yes. There was also Indian food at the Saints last night as an auction item that was magnificent.
Both my parents and my grandparents' anniversaries on Wednesday.
Parents and grandparents' anniversaries on Wednesday. Lori Stratman writes, Mom was able to come home from the hospital. Jamie Radcliffe writes, me and Wendy going to the mountains and sending in his worship associate stuff. Dory Bush recovering from COVID-19 at home. BJ Wheeler writes, Barb and I are both 80 years old this week. I would add to what Chelsea said earlier that it is the sound of a healthy church is a room where people are announcing 53rd wedding anniversaries and babies are laughing. That's it. If you do those 2 things in a 10-minute period, then something is going very, very right here.
I just got a notice of my 60th high school graduation. I don't know if that's a joke.
Depends on who's there.
A 60th high school reunion, which may be a joy or a sorrow. Joy for Theo going to Camp Kitaki for the first time. Life is full of joy, life is full of sorrow. There is a lot that is unspoken every time we do this. So for all those unspoken things, we hold a moment of silence here at the end. Our next hymn is number 360 in the gray hymnal. If you would rise in body or in spirit, the hymn is Here We Have Gathered. Each week we take up a collection to support the programs of this church and our partners in the world. And once a month, this week actually, we set aside the offering to support one of our particular partners in the world. These partners are voted on by the congregation at the spring congregational meeting. This is, I believe, the last Share the Plate Sunday of this church year that's just ending. You have just voted on Share the Plate folks for the coming year. That was an unworshipful thing to say. Here's what matters. We are part of a larger web of organizations doing justice in Lincoln. We do not do this alone. We are not capable of doing it alone. We do it through partnerships and through relationships. That's what this program is about. So I'd like to invite Colette Yellowrobe to come forward and talk to us a little bit about what missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls of Nebraska is up to these days.
Thank you. Good morning. Pavevona, everybody. That means good morning in Cheyenne. I'm Colette Yellowrobe, and Colette Yellowrobe forgot her readers, so she's going to go off memory this morning, if you don't mind. Yeah, I'm not aging gracefully, just so everyone knows. And hello to our relatives joining via the cyber waves there, Zoom and virtual. It's nice to be here. Naish, thank you for letting me come up today and join in service and join in sharing what missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and now missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. You've probably seen that because we are losing a lot of our male, those who identify as male boys as well. Let's go back in time, though. Why is this an issue? Why are there so many, up to 4 out of 6 Native American or American Indian, Alaskan Native women in the United States are going to suffer from verbal, psychological, physical, or sexual abuse in their lifetime? So that's pretty high, as all of you can put the math together on that, right? The numbers for our male relatives, or those who identify as male, is very murky because of there's obvious stigmatization and not providing safe spaces for them. So I would presume they could be as high in some cases. All right. So what started happening is systematically we were not treated as equals in this country. We were granted citizenship in 1924, actually June 2nd, to be honest with you. Just a couple of days ago is when that was ratified finally. So as a result, a lot of our homicide rates or a lot of our abuse rates over time, over centuries, decades, were not cataloged or collected adequately, or we were put off in different racial ethnic categories as we do in the United States. So that's the background. I want to make sure everyone understands why it's such an epidemic today. Missing and murdered Indigenous women, MMIWG, started actually in Canada. Our northern relatives are very progressive, I'm sure some of you know, justice-oriented, and we ratified that or made it a federal recognized holiday for May 5th in the United States just a few years ago. Actually, a young woman, it's named after someone who was on my reservation that was murdered and killed. Sorry to be blunt, I know there's children in the audience. But this is a pretty grim subject. So what we started doing in Nebraska is we're a group of volunteers, mostly women and grandmothers, women leaders, spiritual leaders that came together, and now our male relatives are starting to join us. And we started a all-service volunteer network to support people who are helping in this effort. So what did we do this last year? We supported with the funds that were given to us, we supported vigils in honor of the boarding school. I'm sure you've heard about that, the unearthing of the remains at boarding schools. And we've supported rallies. And actually we have our male relatives stepping up now. They're starting to do more work. Today there's a rally in Omaha for Zachary Bear Hills. That's a pretty infamous case down in the city of Omaha. And most recently, what I've had a direct hand in is we have a major research grant from the National Institute of Justice at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where I work. We got together with 3 states, South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska, and we're starting to investigate trafficking, which is leading to this egregious issue. So that's a lot, but you know, we're doing stuff, is what I'm saying. Yeah. And I appreciate just the support. The ways you can get involved is, of course, send your good thoughts, your prayers, your your just support for anyone that you may know. You'd be surprised how close this can hit our community, especially in rural areas. And then secondly, if you feel as though you could go support action or protest or legislation, you are certainly welcome to do that. In Nebraska, we have legislation on the books now, but now comes all of the other work, like what I'm helping with, the research grants, the trafficking, looking at abuse, keeping our families intact. There's multiple ways to get involved. And if you have questions, just let me know. I'm sure when Jean comes back, she'll be happy to do that, right? We'll just volunteer her right now, on record, yep. And thank you again to Kelly and everyone, and Stacy, my friend, I gotta give her a shout out. So, thank you, Naish, that's all I have, everybody. Okay.
So for Share the Plate Sundays, as our musicians play this next piece, the ushers will pass a plate. Anything not marked otherwise in the plate will go to the work that Colette has just described. In addition, you can give by texting UC Lincoln and the amount you wish to give to 73256. If you do that, just select Share the Plate in the drop-down box for donations. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Our reading today is by Wendell Berry. It is his poem, Sabbaths. The bell calls in the town where forebears cleared the shaded land and brought high daylight down to shine on field and trodden road. I hear but understand contrarily and walk into the woods. I leave labor and load take up a different story. I keep an inventory of wonders and of uncommercial goods. I climb up through the field that my long labor has kept clear. Projects, plans unfulfilled, waylay and snatch at me like briars, for there is no rest here, where ceaseless effort seems to be required yet fails, and spirit tires with flesh, because failure and weariness are sure in all that mortal wishing has inspired. I go in pilgrimage across an old fenced boundary to wildness without age, where, in their long dominion, the trees have been left free. They call the soil here Eden, slants and steeps hard to stand straight upon even without a burden. No more a perfect garden, there's an immortal memory that it keeps. I leave work's daily rule and come here to this restful place where music stirs in the pool and from high stations of the air fall notes of wordless grace, strewn remnants of the primal Sabbath's hymn. And I remember here a tale of evil twined with good, serpent and vine, and innocence of evil's stratagem. I let that go a while, for it's hopeless to correct by generations' toil, and I let go my hopes and plans that no toil can perfect. There is no vision here but what is seen, white bloom nothing explains. But a mute blessedness exceeding all distress, the fresh light stained 100 shades of green, uproar of wheel and fire that has contained us like a cell, opens and lets us hear a stillness longer than all time, where leaf and song fulfill the passing light, pass with the light, return, renewed as in rhyme. This is no human vision, subject to our revision. God's eye holds every leaf as light is worn. Ruin is in place here, the dead leaves rotting on the ground, the live leaves in the air are gathered in a single dance that turns them round and round. The fox cub trots his almost pathless path, as silent as his absence. These passings resurrect a joy without defect, the life that steps and sings in ways of death.
So I'm going to say two things real quick before I start the sermon. The first is that part of this sermon talks frankly about the shooting that happened in Uvalde. I know for some of us that's still very close to home. And so if that's not a thing that you want to hear or talk about this morning, you can come back into the room in about 10 minutes. While you think about that for a moment, I do also want to just say that one of the joys of the last year has been to welcome the Nebraska chamber players into this building. Part of the music that you're hearing this morning is actually the music that the chamber players are playing this weekend, including this afternoon, where our own Dr. Bob Fusen has been joining them for this month's program. So it is a joy to have you all here playing. It's been a joy to hear rehearsals on Thursday nights. Thank you. Okay. So, 2 weeks ago, most of you probably have heard some version of this, I went for a very long walk. Over the last 2 months, a group of Native activists have been protesting a housing development near Wilderness Park. Critically, also near the sweat lodge at the fish farm there. Now, the protest is about a development, but it's also about an underlying systemic problem. How do we, as a community, ensure that Native voices are considered and centered during decisions that affect them? For 2 weeks following a city council vote approving the proposed development, activists erected teepees and occupied the plot of land the development is planned for. And then after 2 weeks, having gotten the attention of the city, they took down the camp, but not before announcing that they were marching, along with anyone that wanted to join them, from the camp near Wilderness Park to the city county building, to the state capitol, to the Catholic cathedral. And that we would carry one of the teepees with us and erect it at each of those stops along the route. A declaration that Native lives and voices must be recognized here in Lincoln. And so it was an honor to be able to join that march representing this congregation. It was an honor to be asked to carry a pole of the teepee from stop to stop. As congregation's mission is to show up, and so I try to whenever possible. And as honored as I was, and as much as this is the beginning of a larger conversation and relationship, which we'll come back to, towards the end of the day, I started to wonder if maybe I had hurt my foot. It felt bruised, like I had maybe stepped wrong on a rock. And then after the march, after about 16 hours, I came home, took off my shoe, and discovered a single blister stretching from the bottom of my big toe halfway across the front of my foot. Now, I pride myself on the physicality I can bring to this job. It's not a requirement of ministry to be able to lift heavy things or walk long distances, in the same way that it is not a requirement, thanks be unto God, that ministers sing well. But both are cultivated tools that help in the work. Different ministers bring different tools to the job. I can lift heavy things and stay away from hot microphones whenever I am singing. So you might imagine my dismay then when the following night after that march, I was unable to help much with the setup of the tent revival that we held. Go back and watch the video on YouTube. I spent most of the night sitting in a chair. There was more moleskin than foot in one of my shoes. It was a reminder that for as much as we want to press on sometimes, occasionally we are simply unable to, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. Sometimes we are hurt and need to rest before going on. Now, this is not the same as saying, stop, don't do it anymore, right? I've been in contact with the Niskithe Prayer Camp leadership since, and by the end of this sermon, we'll talk about how we're going to spend our summer in this congregation, cultivating relationships with Indigenous communities in Lincoln and our Unitarian Universalist faith. It is the same thing as saying that in order to do that, sometimes you have to take the proverbial weight off your foot for a couple days. Unitarian Universalism is a faith community nationwide, worldwide, deeply invested in bringing about a better world, in building justice and cultivating beloved community. And a hard part of that, no matter what metaphor you use for it, is that it is a test of endurance. The moral arc of the universe is long, Theodore Parker said 150 years ago. I cannot see its end, but it bends towards justice. And while he is not one of us, Albert Camus wrote in 1939, in response to France declaring war on Germany, "Our task as humans is to find the few principles that will calm the infinite anguish of free souls. We must mend what has been torn apart, make justice imaginable again in a world so obviously unjust, give happiness a meaning once more to peoples poisoned by the misery of the century." It is a superhuman task. But superhuman is the term for tasks we take a long time to accomplish. That's all. So the question that we all will grapple with, if we are in the work long enough, is this: how do we stay in it? Because let's be real. In it right now feels like responding to multiple interlocking crises every single week. From climate change to large-scale war, to local politics of responding to hate with pride, to the crisis of our country's democracy, inequality, bigotry, gun violence. Add to that the reality of late pandemic life when everybody seems tired and on edge. I thought I was doing okay in responding to the Uvalde shootings. I had some things to say where I was guest preaching last Sunday. It's horrific, and I'm caught between rage at the necessity of red flag laws and basic gun control and just utter despair at our political system's inability to do those things. But I've said that before. I know how to say that. The horror of this thing is that I have said that before and know how to say that. And so it's okay if I'm a little more tender than usual when picking up Ailish from daycare. It's okay, I can make it through that. And then a colleague of mine asked that we pray for Father Eddie Morales, the priest at Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Uvalde, who will preside at 11 funeral masses in the next 2 weeks, 9 of them children in his congregation. For me, that was the spiritual equivalent of looking down and realizing that it was not possible to take one more step until I bandage myself and rest. Because if the moral arc is bending towards if the moral arc of the universe is bending towards justice, I can't see it in that. I don't want to see it in that. I cannot conceive of a loving God that allows that to happen. My mind can't grasp it. It's like a black hole in my imagination. It just keeps skittering off in different directions. This is just too big. The issues that we're dealing with right now are too weighty. Kara Rockhill and I, my colleague from seminary, huddled last Friday, 3 days before we were preaching at each other's churches, swapping notes on what we were going to say to each other's congregations, knowing that we had both written sermons responding to a crisis of the moment. And in the 10 days since we had written those sermons, we weren't sure if that crisis was the urgent one that we needed to be talking about. Ten years ago, we were talking about burnout, compassion fatigue, moral injury, and the like as dangers associated with helping professions and caregivers. Don't really say that anymore. Those aren't problems confined to some small subset of people. And about a decade ago, I heard a Unitarian minister named Rob Hardy's preach about being on fire but not consumed. He was preaching as a metaphor for ministry, my friend Catherine Clarenbach's ordination. The calling, Rob said, was to be a flame for justice, a flame for community, A flame, he said, for budget committee meetings, also holy work. A flame, he said, but not consumed. The image is from the book of Exodus, from the burning bush that Moses sees in the wilderness. Moses led his flock beyond the wilderness, Exodus chapter 3 has it, and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burning up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Hineni, I am here. This image has stuck with me for years. I assume Rob Hardy's had other very wise things to say that day. He is a fantastic minister. But this is the one part I remember of that sermon. This image of things on fire but not burned up. Because it's an image that recurs throughout holy texts. It's the story of Hanukkah, where a lantern keeps burning even after the oil should run out. The story of Pentecost today, where tongues of fire come down from the sky to replenish and renew the ministry of Jesus' disciples. What a thing to be a flame but not consumed, to bring light but not diminish. The thing is that all of these examples, Exodus, Hanukkah, Pentecost, are miracles by definition. They are in the stories because they are so rare, because they are unexpected, because each of them is beyond human understanding or cause. It is because of the sheer unexpectedness of the sight that Moses turns aside and meets God. So where does that leave us on days when we feel consumed, diminished, in need of bandaging and repair? I think first to recognize that we each have deeper resilience than we know. You don't need God for this part, though it's the language that I am most comfortable with. So many times I, you, have felt like we cannot possibly go on. And then somehow, in the middle of that experience, there is a well to draw on. God, grace, sheer human determination, whatever you call it, it's often there unexpectedly. Often not in the ways we want it to be or when we want it to be. But these are the miracles of everyday life. When we are aflame but not consumed, because what is bringing light and heat and warmth to our lives is not coming from within us. There's another quote often attributed to Camus, but I haven't actually been able to find where it's originally from. It's probably a mashup of a couple different things that he said. But it gets at this experience. In the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all that in the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invisible summer. And that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there is something stronger, something better, pushing right back. So there are wells of resilience to draw on, infinite. But we don't always get to choose when they are available to us. So what do we do in the meantime? I think while we're waiting for this mystic experience, we can do the basic stuff well. Don't forget to drink water and get sun. The joke goes, you're basically a houseplant with complicated emotions. To that sun and water, my Midwestern family would probably add food. This is why casseroles delivered without words on the front porch after a funeral are holy. Because those casseroles also remind us that we are interconnected, even as they meet our immediate needs for food, water, light, the houseplant needs. They remind us that we are interconnected, that we are not in this alone. We gather in communities every Sunday and say joys and sorrows. We gather in community so that we can care for each other and be cared for. There's a metaphor here not of fire but of breath. That when you are singing, it's impossible to carry a single note forever. Eventually you need to breathe, but singing in a choir can hold that same single sustained note indefinitely as each person takes a moment to breathe and then rejoin the whole. And sometimes we need to do all of these things at once. Eat well, depend on other people, wait for grace, and trust that the work will still be there after our hurt is healed. Which is all a very long-winded way of saying I'm going on vacation tomorrow. To an undisclosed location with no cell service or email for 2 weeks. If you call me, I will not pick up. If you send me an email, I am not even going to pretend I will get back to it in 2 weeks. I will not read it. Send it again 2 weeks from now. If you send me an email, send it after June 19th, if you want it read. As I'm doing this for all of the reasons we've laid out, I need some time to care for my houseplant self. To recognize that even if I drop out of cell service for a while, there's a community around me to hold things together. To spend some time bandaging my spiritual blisters. Also because I really, really love my wife and we haven't seen enough of each other this year, and I want to sit next to her with a drink and a carved out pineapple. Not everything needs to be particularly complicated or weighty sometimes. It's important to say all that because we have a lot to do. There's a difference between stepping back for a second and making sure your foot's bandaged so that you can keep walking, and saying, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. The one is necessary for long-term work. The other is a time where you really do need people around you to say, are you okay? It's the difference between a blister on your foot and a broken ankle. So we have a lot to do. Over the last 2 months, members of our congregation have been putting together a summer Indigenous programming series. It's going to start June 2nd? July. It's going to start the first weekend in July. There we go. It includes Sunday worship, art shows, movie screenings, workshops, and at least one podcast. It will continue this church's work of dismantling systems of oppression and deepen our relationship with the Native community here in Lincoln. Over the summer, we're going to figure out what kind of church we are post-COVID, or in this liminal space where COVID has ended and not ended. And there's a lot to do because I'm sure I'll preach a longer version of this sermon in about 6 months when I'm starting my sabbatical. But before then, there is a lot of work to do to prepare for that. So one of the gifts I've received from this community was this group of congregants spearheaded by Judy Hart telling me about summer worship, we've got this. both the idea and the planning. That is just a tremendous gift. It's a gift to this whole congregation, and I experience it as a gift to myself. Because it is a gift to be able to take some time for mending and to take some time for planning. So I actually won't be preaching much between now and September. But I will be doing a lot of planning in the office. Just not in the next 2 weeks. I forgot to write a conclusion in this sermon. The text just ends there. But not for the next 2 weeks. Okay, so here. So, leaving that. Judy.
Can I just say it's not just me, that we have a team
Yes.
of people?
Yes, do you want to say who the team is?
I would love to. It's Mary Kay Stillwell, who's sitting in front of me.
Yes.
It's Emily Shatil, who's sitting over here. It's Arden Hill, who's on vacation. It's Suzanne Shackelford. And Mary Kay, who am I forgetting?
Well, Carrie,
Carrie Holloway and Nancy Harris. It's a huge group of people that are putting that together.
It is, and we are joyful and grateful for that. Yes, so for the people on the live stream, it is not just Judy Hart, but also Mary Kay Stillwell, Emily Shatil, Carrie Holloway, Arden Hill, Suzanne Shackelford, and apologies if Nancy Harris. And if we missed anybody, we'll tell you about it as soon as we start. But okay, so here's the actual conclusion. I know it is a great gift to be able to go on vacation. I appreciate that. I appreciate that I work for an employer, all of you, who allow that to happen. My hope is for each of you that in times where you look down and you realize that your foot is a little bit more hurt than you thought it was, and that might be a physical hurt, that might be an emotional hurt, that might be a spiritual hurt that you can't quite articulate, but you feel it, that you pay attention to that you don't keep trying to go forward on it, and you take the time to bandage yourself up and ask for help, because that's the only way it's going to work. The last 3 congregational years have been incredibly intense in this congregation. They've been incredibly intense in the lives of each person that I've talked to over the last 3 years. I've talked to most of you in this room one-on-one at some point in the last couple of years. So I know that those conversations about burnout and moral injury, they are as much for people who have been trying to parent during the pandemic, people who have been trying to get committees to meet during COVID, people who are trying to work for justice in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing. That's everybody. That's all of us. If I didn't mention your thing, I know there isn't one. So take that time. And if you need help figuring out how to bandage yourself up, reach out to each other. That's what the church is for. That's what joys and sorrows are. Okay, that's the end of the sermon. Our closing hymn is number 1068, Rising Green. If you would please rise in body or in spirit. Yeah, this is the life of other duties as assigned as a minister. When the song cuts out and you say, "Do I sing a solo?" No, that will take us out of the moment. We'll just continue on instrumental for a while. Anyway, go in peace, everybody. Go in kindness, go in love, and go in faith. Amen, and blessed be.